SCP-7503 Sacrum Humanum Imperium. Multiversal fiction has grown more and more popular of late, and it's certainly a concept that the SCP universe has meddled with a number of times. Meeting alternate humans from an alternate universe or timeline is always going to be a scenario rife with complications and curiosities. In general, as SCP tends to lean towards darker and more horrific stories, these encounters are more likely to be unpleasant and unfortunate than to turn into a cooperative arrangement. SCP-7503 features the SCP Foundation encountering a strange anomaly that seems to be from a different version of Earth, one more technologically advanced, militant, and religious. As it turns out, there's more where that came from, a lot more, and the Foundation may have to prepare for the fight of their lives. Let's take a look. SCP-7503 is the skeletal remains of an unidentified male dressed in Renaissance period ecclesiastical garments and intricate jewelry made of gold and various precious stones and gems. An archaeological assessment of the remains indicates that the clothing and ornaments date back to the 16th century, while the skeleton itself is estimated to be from before the 3rd century. The archaeology department hypothesizes that it is one of the catacomb saints, which were a number of skeletons of ancient Christians taken out of catacombs, exuberantly decorated, and worshipped as relics of saints during a time between the 16th and 18th centuries. The anomalous effect of the remains triggers when a member of the Catholic faith is within 5 meters of it, and after 10 minutes of being nearby, around 10% of Catholics will become devoted to the remains, venerating it as a saint. After 1 hour, this percentage rises to 100%. Regardless of the individual's prior degree of religiousness, they will display a fanatical commitment to the remains, declaring it to be the true representative of the Catholic faith. They will also express an intent to help the saint in reclaiming the Holy See in Rome, the jurisdiction of the Pope, even by force if necessary. To this date, however, there have been no records of aggressions against the Holy See related to the remains. The only known method of preventing this influence from occurring is immediate amnestic treatment after exposure. If not done immediately, the effects are presumed to be permanent, and since the fanatical behavior and high risk of containment breach is a concern, the Ethics Committee is currently considering whether termination should be an option, if the amnestic treatment fails. In addition to the other behavior, affected individuals will become obsessed with reuniting the remains with SCP-7503-2, a 6-meter-tall mechanical construct resembling a suit of 16th century Italian armor, albeit with distorted proportions. Its exterior is composed of an unidentified golden metal of remarkable durability, capable of withstanding modern heavy fire and artillery without suffering apparent damage. Internally, this construct possesses a complex clockwork mechanism, allowing it to move, without requiring an external power source. It's also armed with several weapons, including both medieval bladed and blunt weaponry, as well as anachronistic ones, such as Gatling-type firearms, flamethrowers, and rocket launchers. The Horizon Initiative, a group of interest dedicated to anomalies related to the Abrahamic religions, is currently in possession of the construct for safety reasons, and is investigating the advanced weaponry. The construct is not capable of autonomous behavior, but instead it will remain completely dormant until the skeletal remains are placed inside of it. Individuals under the influence of the anomaly will attempt to place the remains inside of the construct, which will then give it control over it, including allow it to vocally communicate through unknown means. The two were both discovered during an archaeological excavation in a catacomb in Italy, located within meters of one another in a previously uncharted chamber. Upon discovery, members of the team came under the influence of the remains and placed them into the construct, activating it. The construct then emerged from the excavation site and began marching towards Rome. Upon being informed of this, the Horizon Initiative activated Protocol Gladius Petri, designed to protect the Pope from anomalous threats. He was secured in a bunker, while the Horizon Initiative deployed Project Malleus, their combat forces, along with the combined forces of the Swiss Guard, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, the Italian Army and Air Force, as well as the National Gendarmerie of Italy. The Foundation was also sent a request for assistance, so an MTF was sent out as well. The Italian Air Force bombarded the construct, while ground forces mounted a fortified perimeter to prevent it from reaching Rome. While it proved highly resistant against the modern weaponry, they did manage to stall its advancement until the MTF arrived. Foundation air forces managed to incapacitate the construct with plasma cannon bombardment, allowing the MTF to approach and remove the remains from inside, nullifying the threat. A large-scale cover-up operation involving misinformation and mass amnestic application was then conducted in the aftermath. We're then provided the next iteration of the 7503 document, in which it has been upgraded to Keter class, and the containment protocols state that there is currently no known way of containing 7503. The number now describes a spacefaring theocratic political entity from the alternate timeline designated as Alpha 3. Not only does this group exert total dominance over its version of the planet Earth, but it has also colonized an estimated 54% of the Milky Way. Its technological achievements are anomalous in nature, employing a type of functional thaumaturgy that bears resemblance to medieval alchemical practices. It has also shown strong xenophobic hostility and imperialistic intentions towards other social and political entities outside of its control, and with their FTL capabilities, they have engaged in a so-called eternal crusade against all extraterrestrial sentient life. This advance has been halted, however, by a coalition of alien civilizations, known as the Covenant of the Second Hytoth, and the two factions are currently engaged in a galaxy-spanning, protracted Cold War. After containing the original 7503, the Mechanical Construct, and Saint, the discovery of at least two other similar anomalies led to the reclassification to Keter. Horizon Initiative researchers have now designated the constructs as Goliath-class Relicarium, and fortunately the other two were contained before they could be activated. Sometime later, an unknown spacecraft was suddenly detected entering Earth's orbit by Foundation radars. The spacecraft crashed in Turkey, and the Foundation quickly moved in to secure the impact zone and create a cover story. The crashed spacecraft was designated ARC-12 by the Horizon Initiative, and it bore no resemblance to any known spaceship design, being described as a golden Gothic cathedral in the form of a warship. After 16 hours, the gates of the ship opened, and 5 humans emerged, surrendering themselves willingly to the Foundation. They identified themselves as members of the Chaos Apostasy, an alternative version of the Chaos Insurgency that is working alongside the Covenant of the Second Hytoth against 7503. They agreed to provide the Foundation with crucial information regarding the nature, history, and goals of 7503. From this, the Foundation has determined that 7503 will almost certainly have hostile intentions towards Earth, and their military capabilities are estimated to be orders of magnitude above the current global military forces. The point of divergence between the Prime Timeline and Alpha 3 seems to be around the 12th century, when Alpha 3's version of the Catholic Church took a different approach towards anomalies. Instead of condemning the anomalous as heretical, they incorporated anomalies into their belief system and encouraged research into them. A specialized church division, the Sanctificatio Continentium Pontifactis Congregatio, or the SCPC, was established to conduct research under the supervision of the Council of Cardinals. A priority direction of their research was to achieve sainthood as a rejection of the flesh and the material world, And so, as a result of SCPC efforts, the Church perfected an anomalous procedure known as beatification. This process eventually entails the removal of all of an individual's flesh and the binding of their soul into their skeleton. Due to this process, an individual loses the capacity to move on their own, but gains telepathic abilities, including the power to mentally influence and mind control any Catholic individual within a certain radius. They also become capable of operating anomalous mechanical constructs, the reliquari, which are used as a means of transportation and war machines. In 1392, the Pope himself underwent this process, declaring himself to be the Pope Emperor of mankind, and refashioned the Papal States into the Sacrum Humanum Imperium. With the telepathic capabilities of the beatified individuals, they soon exerted dominance over all of continental Europe, and thanks to the reliquari and other anomalous weaponry, they managed to conquer all of Earth within 100 years. The Imperium's technological and thaumaturgical capabilities continued to grow exponentially from then on, and by 1588, they had achieved space travel, as well as rudimentary terraforming and habitat building. They quickly colonized the solar system, and by 1630 had mastered faster-than-light travel, allowing them to expand outwards. As soon as alien life was encountered, it was declared heretical, and the Eternal Crusade was launched with the intention of purging the Milky Way of non-human life. Most of the extraterrestrial civilizations encountered were technologically inferior to the Imperium, and the surprise attacks allowed them to achieve rapid success in conquering large portions of the galaxy. This stalled out when the Covenant of the Second Hytoth gathered together to resist the Imperium's expansion. Now, it's believed that the Imperium is instead looking to conquer alternate versions of Earth, specifically the Prime Timeline. We're then given an interview log between a Foundation researcher and one of the Chaos Apostasy members, Julius Avicenna. The interviewer asks him if there's anything they can do to make them more comfortable, to which Julius says that they're alright, but maybe they could abuse their generosity and ask for more chocolate bars, which are considered luxurious desserts back in the Imperium, reserved for high church officials. Those ambitious enough to climb up the ladder, but not fanatic enough to want to be beatified. He then sighs and says that he's really enjoying being able to relax and not having to worry about warding off indoctrination every single moment. The interviewer asks him why he's worried about indoctrination if they've found a way to break it. Julius explains that indoctrination is both quite a simple concept and a difficult one to understand, and after reading some of the Foundation's documents, he compares it somewhat to memetics. Reading their documents on the reliquari, he agrees that to be susceptible to the telepathic influence, you have to have had the 3 Catholic sacraments of Christian initiation: baptism, confirmation, and Eucharist. But that's not enough for them to maintain total control, as a certain degree of true faith seems to be needed. People have to actually believe those sacraments mean something, and that the Church has the truth in order to be affected by the indoctrination. If that faith is somehow shaken, then the indoctrination can be broken, and sometimes people will just spontaneously have a crisis of faith and break free. Others, like himself, may need a little help though, as the apostasy found that certain high-concentration amnestic drugs can help to break long-term indoctrination. It's ultimately the individual's choice whether they take the pill or not, and he says that in some sense it's harder to live without faith. They're always on the lookout for those at the breaking point of indoctrination though, not only because they need more recruits, but also because if they don't join them, they'll be easy prey for the Horizon Inquisition. On the other hand, in the same way that indoctrination can be broken, it may come back again if the faith is somehow restored, so they always have to be on the lookout not only for each other, but also for themselves. The interviewer then asks about the Inquisition, to which Julius says that they are the secret police of the Empire, purging every sign of heresy wherever they find it, and whatever they decide it will be this time. They are the reason that the apostasy work mostly as independent cells, as it's easier to maintain the charade that they are still loyal subjects of the Imperium. Even though they are the Inquisition's primary target, no one is safe, as anyone who shows even the slightest sign of breaking indoctrination will become a target. The interviewer then mentions physical proximity to a beatified individual being a factor, and Julius confirms that indoctrination is easier to break when they're not around, and fortunately they can't be everywhere. Only around 15% of the population has been beatified, with it being mostly comprised of government and church officials, as well as the Reliquary army. Since they're functionally immortal and can occupy their post indefinitely, they don't let anyone new in unless strictly necessary. At some point, the apostasy feared that they wanted to turn all of humanity into them, but the Imperium seems eager to maintain the hierarchy. As far as they know, Beatos can't indoctrinate one another, but even among them there is a strict hierarchy. The exact details of the procedure are well guarded, but there seems to be different levels of it, corresponding to different psychic prowess. The interviewer comments that their collective power is terrifying though, and that the apostasy's fight would be impossible without the Covenant of the Second Hytoth. Julius agrees that the Covenant provides them with tons of resources, including anomalous help. Without it, they would have fallen long ago, and in exchange, the apostasy provides intel and helps to sabotage the Imperium's military campaign. That's partially the reason they ended up here, as they were investigating a massive military mobilization that they suspected was another crusade against the Covenant. Something was off, though, as usually such a crusade would have involved a massive armada, but instead they were preparing smaller ships, more suited for intraplanetary travel. They were already aware of parallel timelines, thanks to Covenant intel, and had gathered some information suggesting that the SCPC was looking into time-related anomalies, so they were suspicious. They managed to steal one of the ships and confirm that it had been modified for trans-timeline travel. This explained the lack of an interstellar armada, as they didn't need one if their plan was to invade another Earth. The interviewer suggests that some may doubt that the apostasy came here to warn the Foundation entirely out of charity, to which Julius says that they can check their ship logs for corroboration, and sometimes even men of science have to take a leap of faith. As for this being a charity operation, he says that neither the apostasy nor the Covenant have been able to make advances against the Imperium in centuries, and they hope that maybe, if the Imperium were to lose here, they could be destabilized enough to be vulnerable in the other timeline. The apostasy won't rest until the Empire is gone, and they'll try anything to have their victory, no matter how hard, dangerous, or crazy it is. Their motto is ad astra per aspera, after all, meaning through hardships to the stars. The interviewer admires his conviction, but admits that their brief encounter already with the single Relicarium doesn't make the situation look great. Julius says that that was just their reconnaissance to test Earth's defenses. The true extent of their strength will be seen soon. Julius finishes the interview by suggesting that the Foundation does not place much trust in the Inquisition, the ones they call the Horizon Initiative. With that, we're provided the next iteration of the 7503 document, as the Foundation and the rest of Earth prepares for the inevitable conflict. The next version of 7503 is a little different though, as it's actually the Imperium's version of SCP-7503, which is, of course, the Foundation's Earth. The Continentium Classis is listed as Interregnum, and the Secundarium Classis is Blasphemia. The containment procedures mention that none of the missionaries sent to 7503 have been received appropriately, and 7503 insists on ignoring God's word, denying the gift of grace. If they continue to deny God's gift and persist in their blasphemous ways, they will be found guilty of heresy and will be marked for a crusade by the Council of Cardinals. The Imperium's description of 7503 is an alternate creation that was also bestowed by God with the gift of humanity. 7503 Homo sapiens are believed to possess an immortal soul, just as humans from prime creation do, for God would not have created beings in his own image without blessing them with a soul. They are also assumed to have fallen from grace, the same way that prime creation did. But unlike the Holy Imperial Church, their church has failed to reject the sin of flesh, and has rescinded its role as the lighting guide for humanity. Pagan and heretical beliefs, along with atheism and sodomy, are allowed to be practiced in the open in unashamed defiance of God, and the so-called Pope still bears the sin of flesh. We're then given an addendum, a testimony from the chief imperial scientist and cardinal in the trial against 7503, which begins with the creed of the Quantum Christica. The gratia of God is infinite, so is the sin of man. Infinite is thy Lord's creation, as above, so below. Humankind is in a superposition between sin and grace, for only Logos can collapse it. Creation is in a superposition between truth and blasphemy, for Logos is the Alpha and the Omega. An infinite number of creations means an infinite number of blasphemies, an infinite number of regretful Adams, and an infinite number of sinful Evas. The fall of man is an ever-repeating fractal, for the redemption of man is an ever-repeating fractal. The sin of flesh is not to be allowed to thrive endlessly, for that is the penitence of the impious. Heresy is not to be allowed to go unchallenged, for that is the duty of the pious. Cycles of guilt are not to be broken, for that is the eternal return of the Son of Man. Blasphemy is not to be allowed to go unpunished, for dark is the soul of man, and flesh was its first sin. The gift of truth and grace shall be delivered to all creations. The original blasphemy shall be punished in every creation. Quantum Christica is unambiguous in its condemnation of the sin of flesh wherever it may be found. Both theological and scientific arguments are present as indisputable proof, for God is the ultimate answer found by faith, reason, and science. The Church should not only be universal, in the sense that it should extend to every corner of the known universe, but truly multiversal, in the sense that it should extend to every corner of every known universe. It follows that it is the holy duty of the pious to ensure all of God's creations are free from sin. It would be both heresy against faith and idiocy against reason and science to suggest otherwise. SCP-7503 shall be the first purge on a renewed eternal crusade. Amen. The next addendum, then, is a video recording of the preparation for the upcoming crusade against the Foundation's Earth. The 13th Reserve Legion of the Dolorous Miracle is mobilized, and the video begins by showing the massive interior of Imperial Hangar 632. Walls and columns are decorated with statues of beatified leaders and machines of war, with a massive stained glass depicting the fall of man on the farthest wall. The warships, a cross between a cathedral and a dreadnought, await orders, with there being 400 chariot gunships and 20 arc ships all ready for trans-temporal travel. A rumbling sound is soon heard as 480 Reliquary Goliath units enter the frame and march towards the Ark ships, organized into separate centuria. Each centuria bears a different color, armament, and coat of arms of its patron. There are the Red Lancers of St. Dumas, the Duelist of Fate, the Scarlet Gatling Gunners of St. Lucas, the New Evangelist, the Blue Leper Drillers of Holy Esculapio, the Healer of the Everlasting Sword, the Green Rockets of St. Cyprianus, the Full Metal Preacher, and the Grey Knight Flagellants of St. Virgil of Our Hope in Hell. Behind the Goliath units comes another group of mechanical constructs, consisting of 300 Reliquary Equity units, their bodies resembling a quadruped animal with the torso of an armored knight. Each Equa is armed with a lance, a shield, a side sword, and a heavy machine gun. The Reliquary units all triple the size of the human troops marching alongside them, their numbers consisting of 2,000 knights from the Order of Malta, 5,900 auxiliary knights from the Teutonic Order Engineering Corps, and 15,000 men-at-arms. The knights from the Order of Malta bear heavy battle armor and personal Gatling guns. The auxiliary knights consist of specialized shock troops, sappers, and military engineers, and the men-at-arms are recruited from the lower castes, but each are equipped with battle armor. The Armored Cavalry Division consists of 200 Beato-piloted Carraccio heavy tanks and 500 Pardoner armored assault vehicles, adorned with intricate statues depicting warrior angels, giving them the aspect of mobile altars and chapels. The statues are not merely decorations, however, but instead fully functional battle automatons. The army eventually boards the Ark ships as the first chariots begin to take off, and the war begins. A note informs us that this legion shall constitute the vanguard of the Holy Campaign against 7503, with 2 other legions joining them next month after they finish their current campaign. In other words, the Foundation is in a spot of trouble. The next iteration of the 7503 file is yet another different version of it, this time from the files of the Multiversalist Church of the Second Hytoth. The document is interspersed with excerpts from a mission log featuring a Chaos Apostasy squad infiltrating an Imperial spacecraft carrier. They're on comms with Multiversal Command and are cautiously advancing through the ship while avoiding patrolling Relicarium units. The containment procedures mention that the Multiversalist Church of the Second Hytoth is working together with the Multiversal Foundation Alliance to prevent the creation of new 7503 instances. When one is identified, Protocol Chaos's Gambit should be immediately put into action, as it has a 33% chance currently of stopping the formation of new instances. The Chaos Apostasy team approaches a chariot gunship, opening the strong lock and slipping inside. The interior matches the Imperium's opulent yet macabre style, designed to evoke the Baroque cathedrals of yore, and the seats for the troops are pew-shaped, with even the control panels modeled after ecclesiastical organs. In the middle of the control room, the Relicarium module hosts the ship's pilot. Inside of an elaborate golden cage lies the skeletal Saint Navigator, still in a state of deep meditation to save energy before taking off. The team's engineer silently approaches the back of the golden box and removes a plate, revealing the alchemic circuitry below it. Working quickly and quietly to avoid alerting the Beato, they manage to override the pilot, giving them total control over the navigator system. Multiversal Command asks them if they're clear to initiate Chaos's Gambit. This document describes SCP-7503 as a patahistorically ontokinetic intertimeline virus. For it to be capable of infecting a timeline, 2 conditions should be met. 1. Homo sapiens has to be the dominant species on Earth, and 2. a religious and political institution known as the Catholic Church exists. Once it has infected a timeline, it will cause the Catholic Church to develop into a political entity known as the Sacrum Humanum Imperium, who will develop a process called beatification that will allow its leadership to access an undead state that grants them not only functional immortality, but also psionic abilities. These abilities allow mind control over the Catholic population through indoctrination, and telepathic control over war machines called Relicari. Inevitably, the Imperium will achieve political domination over Earth and turn to interstellar expansion, conquering approximately 50% of the Milky Way until its advances are halted by a version of the Church of the Second Hytoth. After entering a stalemate, the virus will look for an alternate Earth timeline to infect, and the Imperium will send a small number of Relicarium units, piloted by a beatified individual. This vanguard will then subsequently be contained by the Foundation and the Horizon Initiative, who will proceed to research the Relicarium units and the Beato pilots. Eventually, the leadership of the Catholic branch of the Horizon Initiative will become radicalized by the possibilities of the Relicari and beatification technologies, and attempt to use them to achieve dominion over Earth. A war will start between the Catholic Horizon Initiative and the political powers of the world, including the Foundation and GOC. In 29% of cases, the Horizon Initiative will be victorious and become the new local version of the Imperium. In all other cases, the HI will be defeated, but the Foundation and GOC will be left dramatically debilitated, at which point Earth will be invaded by the original Imperium that sent the units, easily defeating Earth's forces and assimilating Earth into the Imperium. The timeline will become another instance of 7503, and the cycle of infection begins again. The Chaos Apostasy team asks if they should proceed with Protocol Amata, version 616 as well, but Command just tells them to proceed with baseline Chaos's Gambit. The engineer proceeds to upload the protocol routine into the navigator system, but suddenly an error message appears in the terminal, reading, "Repent." Alarm sounds then go off across the hangar, and the team prepares a defensive perimeter. They inform Command that the beatified pilot has breached their override, and the Chaos's Gambit initiation is being blocked. They are now under heavy fire from Relicarium units, but Amata is not being blocked, so it's their only gateway. Relicari units begin to surround the occupied ship, and although the engineer is trying to activate the ship's artillery, the pilot won't allow it. The rest of the squad fires their plasma guns at the approaching constructs, but it isn't enough to stop the advance. One of the team decides to exit the ship, running towards the constructs. They are promptly gunned down, but manage to release the cargo on their biohazard containment backpack, the Apostate Parasite. This is a biological automata designed by the Covenant to hijack Relicarium units. It lunges onto the nearest Relicarium and inserts itself into its machinery, crushing the beatified driver inside and taking control. It manages to take down another Relicarium, but is swiftly surrounded by others and is soon shredded to pieces. The remaining biomass tries to crawl its way into another host, but is quickly stopped by a flamethrower. Command yells at the team to not initiate Amata under any circumstance, but the team is no longer responding. We're then given a description of Protocol Chaos's Gambit, the only known way of altering the outcome of a 7503 infection. Other proposed strategies, like a direct intervention from the Multiversal Foundation Alliance, carry a risk of chrono-ontological destabilization, increasing the risk of a reality failure scenario for that timeline. From the timeline where the infection is being transmitted, the local versions of the Church of the Second Hytoth and the Chaos Insurgency should work together to steal a ship from the Imperium. A team of CI operators will then use the stolen ship to travel to the targeted timeline's Earth, shortly after the containment of the first Relicarium unit. They should surrender to the local Foundation and earn their trust in order to warn them against the upcoming invasion, as well as the HI treason. If successful, this will give the Foundation and the GOC time to prepare. Although the Imperium will have superior military strength initially, rapid integration of anomalies into military doctrine can give both organizations reasonable, albeit limited, success chance, hence the 33% success chance. It's believed that the first instances of Chaos's Gambit occurred organically, as a fluctuation of the virus's natural history. Once the Multiversal Foundation Alliance and Church of the Second Hytoth became aware of this possibility, a campaign to indirectly influence the affected timelines and initiate the protocol on every possible opportunity was launched. Under most circumstances, to avoid unforeseen effects on timeline stability, local Chaos Insurgency and Church of the Second Hytoth instances should not be aware of any multiversal interference. Protocol Amata is a series of modified versions of this protocol that are executed by CI operatives under direct MFA guidance on throwaway timelines, those that usually degrade and collapse into the nearest stable timeline. While the current iteration of Protocol Amata has the potential of increasing the success rate to 45%, more research is needed before it can be safely and reliably deployed into baseline timelines without ontological risks. While we're not told what Protocol Amata is, Multiversal Command was trying to warn them that the targeted timeline was definitely not a throwaway timeline. The Chaos Apostasy team informs Command that they executed Protocol Amata successfully, but gets no reply in return. After trying multiple times to get a response, they get one, but not from Command. It reads, "And yet, after all these cycles, you still find yourself screaming in terror into that void where no one would ever answer you. No one but me. For I am the voice of one calling in the wilderness. I am the Alpha and the Omega. The possibilities within me are beyond anything you can conceive. Yet you still insist on resisting. Yet you refuse to submit your guilt to me, as if you could atone for it in a way that matters." With that, we're given the next iteration of the file. The next version is back to being a Foundation document, but there's definitely something off about its format. It describes 7503 as the mummified remains of an unidentified male dressed in Buddhist monk garments. Archaeological assessment of the remains indicates that the clothing and ornaments date back to the 16th century, while the skeletal remains are older, estimated to be before the 3rd century. The archaeology department has hypothesized that it is one of the Soku Shinbutsu, the bodies of Buddhist monks and nuns that underwent a process of self-mummification. Its anomalous effect triggers when a member of the Buddhist faith is within a radius of 5 meters from it, as after 10 minutes of proximity, around 10% of Buddhists will become devoted to it and venerate it as a Buddha. After 1 hour, this percentage rises to 100%. Regardless of previous religiosity, they will display a fanatical commitment to the remains, declaring it to be the true representative of the Buddhist faith. They will also express an intent to help the remains in reclaiming Potala Palace in Lhasa, the ancestral residence of the Dalai Lama, by force if necessary. In addition, affected individuals will become obsessed with reuniting the remains with a 6-meter-tall mechanical construct resembling a suit of 16th century Chinese armor, albeit with distorted proportions, capable of withstanding modern heavy fire and artillery without suffering apparent damage. It's also equipped with several weapons, including Gatling-type guns, flamethrowers, and rocket launchers, and the Samsara Initiative is currently investigating the advanced weaponry, with evidence pointing to it being anomalous in nature. Both the remains and the construct were discovered during an archaeological excavation in a monastery in Tibet, at which point the team became affected by the remains and placed it inside of the construct, activating it. It emerged from the excavation site and began marching towards Lhasa. The Samsara initiative activated Protocol Mukhalinda, securing the Dalai Lama in a bunker before deploying the full strength of their armed forces. They were joined by the combined forces of the Gurkha Guard, the Sovereign Sohe International Corps, the National Revolutionary Army and Air Force, as well as the Indo-Tibetan Border Police. The Foundation was also notified and assistance was requested, with them sending an MTF in response. While the construct proved to be highly resistant to damage, they managed to stall it long enough to remove the mummified remains from inside of it, nullifying the threat. A large-scale cover-up operation was conducted in the aftermath of the incident. We're then provided with a link to the next iteration of the file, but it leads nowhere, suggesting only that the cycle will continue. So obviously, this article is heavily inspired by the Warhammer 40,000 universe, which features a xenophobic human empire with advanced technology leading great crusades across the galaxy in the name of their god. Of course, the Warhammer 40k setting has had decades of world building to flesh out all of these aspects, while this is just one article containing a cursory look at a similar empire. The Imperium of 7503 seems to have very little threats to its existence, with their only resistance being from a large coalition of other planets, whereas the Imperium of 40k has to deal with a never-ending cavalcade of murderous horrors. Neither version is good, as even the God Emperor during his Great Crusade was quite xenophobic, but the version in 7503 seems to be much more clear-cut in its evilness. We're never told what exactly Protocol Amata is, but it seems to be a change to the virus to make it target Buddhism instead of Catholicism, perhaps with the hopes that a Buddhist empire would never be as violent or oppressive as a Catholic one. Based on the fact that they still ended up with mechanical constructs armed with Gatling guns, I'd say that didn't work out. Honestly, the 33% chance of success that the Chaos's Gambit has is pretty impressive, considering the scale of the forces that the Imperium is bringing against Earth. I looked at a similar topic in my video on whether or not the SCP Foundation could take on the 40k universe, and generally it's fairly one-sided outside of some risky scenarios involving anomalies. Maybe the Foundation will have better odds against the Buddha Emperor of mankind, but I think chances are that the cycle will continue, and in the grim darkness of the far future, there will be only war. SCP-8002 Maslow's Fire Part 1. A question that has been brought up in the past in relation to the SCP universe is, what exactly is the extent of the Foundation's obligation towards society? Sure, their primary purpose is to protect the normal world from the abnormal, but in this pursuit they have amassed an incredible amount of power and capabilities. Much like Superman can go off and fight a world-destroying villain one day and rescue a cat out of a tree the next, the Foundation could easily use their capabilities to help people in countless ways. SCP-8002 is an anomaly which showcases one grand way the Foundation could help out, through miraculous healthcare. But when things go wrong, it really comes down to one concept: treating each other well. Let's take a look. The article begins with two individuals, Sams and Torres, discussing a situation in a hospital. Torres remarks that the bird's still dead for months or years yet, so they don't need to worry, but Sams isn't so sure, saying that even if it is, that just leaves them with a ticking time bomb underneath their feet. A voice then comes over the intercom, informing Director Torres that critical patients are inbound from Site-17. Sams says that they are just going to keep shooting it, so they need to come up with something. Sams points to a printout on Torres' desk with a photo of a small, stout woman with cropped gray hair and says that she's their ticket. Sams wants to pull her vitals and her history to get a plan together, so if they need to move, they can have it ready. Torres sighs and says that he'll fund it a bit, but they don't need to do anything yet, as the bird's still steady and she's likely under their influence. The two then stand, putting on their coats, and look out the door down the yellowing linoleum hall. Elsewhere in the hospital, something is catching fire. SCP-8002 is a thaumiel anomaly, meaning that it assists in some way with the Foundation's operations, and is the SCP Foundation's primary hospital and medical center, a vast subterranean complex incorporating both outpatient clinics and inpatient treatment facilities for up to 150,000 simultaneous patients. Many of the mechanisms employed in its operations are either mundane or commonplace among Foundation facilities, but its core anomaly is Cleric, an anomalous life support system and biological regeneration engine created by the Medical Division. Cleric emits a variety of electromagnetic energy in the far ultraviolet range known as cleric radiation, which provides a variety of benefits to the exposed. These benefits include faster and more efficient hemostasis, rapid tissue proliferation, reduced incidence of infection, reduced incidence of infectious disease transmission, reduced incidence of cancerous cell growth, fewer cellular transcription errors, and reversal and recovery from otherwise untreatable anomalous conditions. When combined with SCP-8002's industrial-scale quick care systems, Cleric allows the Foundation to facilitate mass, rapid, and discreet treatment of civilians affected by anomalous events, admitting and treating as many as 12,500 patients per hour. Cleric radiation is the first-line method of treatment for a large variety of anomalous conditions, and forms a vital part of the organization's operational infrastructure. The Foundation operates 8002 as a healthcare conglomerate under the name Aeonian Health Systems Incorporated, which is also a core part of job security plans for many Foundation personnel. Current estimates predict as many as 86% of Foundation staff members will visit 8002 for cleric therapy at least once during their careers, as exposure to anomalous harm remains commonplace despite the Foundation's efforts to improve containment security. Cleric itself is housed deep beneath 8002 in a secure area of the facility, being self-maintaining, and access to it is forbidden. We'll get to a full description of Cleric as well as its design, location, and the suspected reasons behind its gradual failure over the next 18 months later. We're then given a provider profile on an Andrea Maslov, MD. Maslov has clearance level 3 and specializes in neurology, recurring anomalies, and chronic pain. She joined Aeonian Health Systems in 2021 after serving 18 years as a Foundation MTF field medic. She's a former Type Red rejuvenator, meaning that she can anomalously heal others and herself, but she now works with victims of chronic injury or illness who cannot be fully treated by Cleric. In her spare time, she enjoys bouldering, pulp romance novels, and gardening, especially root vegetables and winter gourds. We're given a care log for a patient named Henry Peck that she's looking after, a 36-year-old man presenting with subacute craniofacial pain on the right side. Pain began after accidental exposure to an SCP and is consistent with others exposed to the same anomaly. Peck visited a topside clinic 6 weeks ago and was advised to try anti-allergy medications, but he failed these treatments and was referred to SCP-8002 by a supervisor after he began experiencing auditory hallucinations. Peck sits nervously in a room when Maslov comes in, dressed in aqua blue medical scrubs and weather-worn white Crocs adorned with pumpkins. Behind her trails her young technical assistant. She introduces herself as Maslov, saying it's her pleasure, and squeezes his hand once before withdrawing. She says that he has been hurting some time in the face, and he says for about 6 months, to which she says that they will fix. She consults his chart and remarks that he tried sinus treatments, when it's obviously his nervous system. She says that they have plenty better for that than the water pot you pour in the nose, and Peck laughs, saying that he's looking forward to her help. Maslov looks him up and down and says that he doesn't need her, he needs Cleric. Cleric is magic robot doctor, far better than a babbling old woman like her. Peck seems hesitant, however, and she asks him if he's scared of robots, as that is hardly feasible in their line of work. She mentions the one they have now that is like a giant samurai in a hat which men can ride inside, remarking that she thought they were having a budget crisis. The tech interrupts her, and she apologizes, asking why he doesn't want CR therapy. Peck replies that it isn't that, but he heard that she could maybe help, and she understands. She pulls up her undershirt, exposing her abdomen, where a huge black mark can be seen running along her side. It seems to bubble, coursing along her skin like a living thing. She says that this thing has been in her for 3 years, but she lowers her shirt, stating that her and the tech had just had lunch, to which the tech thanks her. She explains that she cannot help him that way, not anymore. If she didn't have that mark, she could heal 200 MTF soldiers at once, but now she's always healing that thing. She can barely get over a cold now, and if she weren't so gifted, it would have killed her long ago. Peck says that he's sorry, and she replies that it is terrible, and she'd love to say otherwise, as people always want a happy story. Peck asks if it hurts, to which she says, often, and Peck says that it consumes you, but he knows his face is nothing like that. Maslov disagrees, however, saying that no pain is better than another, and we live with what we get. Peck says that he can't stop thinking about it, and it hurts all the time. Maslov tells him that she will not let him live in pain, and she cannot give him what he wanted, but she can give him Cleric. Peck is still hesitant, saying that he's seen some things from other people, and Maslov agrees that there are rumors around it. That's natural given the miracle of the thing, and of course the Foundation is a masterful generator of conspiracies. Half of her staff are convinced that the gumball machine in the atrium is actually the site director. The tech chimes in to say that she saw it move, but Maslov moves on, telling Peck that if he wants to try medical therapy, she will not blame him. There's a drug that works on his condition somewhat and will bring a little relief, but she wants to heal him fully, so she suggests Cleric. She believes it to be safe for him, in small doses, despite these rumors, and that's her recommendation. She asks him if she can show him, to which he says okay. She heads over to the wall and retrieves a small bright orange box with a button, handing it to Peck. She says that this switch will lower the shielding around this room, exposing them to Cleric and allowing its radiation to enter. They can cut it off any time, so Peck agrees for just a moment and pushes the button. The room is bathed in white light, and Maslov's side, as well as Peck's right jaw, suddenly ignite in red flames, causing Peck to scream. Despite this, he says that it doesn't hurt, and in fact, the pain is gone. They sit back down, burning, and Maslov says that this is much like what she did before, but Cleric won't cure them. It doesn't work on chronic harms, but it holds them at bay, so they simply have to return and be retreated. She recommends twice weekly to keep him without pain, but he hesitates, looking at the fire on Maslov's side and licking his lips, and says no before pushing the button again. He tells her that he doesn't want that, as he's seen them, how their eyes look, how they sweat, how they breathe. Maslov sighs and says that she understands, but she will provide a prescription for that drug to give him some relief. He takes it, thanking her, and saying that he's sorry that she couldn't help more before leaving. Maslov turns to her tech afterwards and says, his loss, before dismissing the tech until her next meeting. She then picks up the exposure switch and presses the button again. On June 23, 2023, a critical containment breach necessitated mass treatment at 8002, with the affected population including 24,000 civilians and 146 Foundation personnel. Civilians were prioritized, per protocol, followed by urgent personnel, while others were waitlisted for Aeonian health provider availability within 4 to 6 months. Civilians were triaged for access and placed into 8002's Mass Treatment and Amnestic Processor, or MTAP. MTAP was designed in conjunction with the Cleric system and is a group of mass conveyance elevators with a capacity of 8,900 riders per hour. It subjects passengers to increasingly concentrated CR as they descend. Once all passengers have been normalized, they are given amnestics and returned to the surface. While MTAP successfully resolved at least 17,000 of the cases, the system concluded its descent without fully treating the remainder. Recognizing this, MTAP refused to reset to its starting point, trapping the civilians on board and allowing their infections to worsen for 38 minutes before staff took notice. Anomalously affected passengers subsequently broke free of their restraints and harmed one another, resulting in a large number of casualties and partial contamination of 8002 and the MTAP system. Analysis has determined that Cleric failed to subject passengers to sufficient CR during MTAP's descent, despite routinely providing sufficient radiation in the past. Testing has since determined that the total CR submersion of 8002 has been dropping site-wide since at least 2019. Containment specialists and armed security personnel have been dispatched to Cleric's security chamber in an attempt to reinvigorate the system. Director Torres sent a note to site administrators to comment on the estimates prepared by the financial office about the huge losses that they'd suffer if they lost 8002's Cleric radiation. He assures them that they're on top of it, as caregivers are being asked to make overtime hours available to meet the demand, and they're looking into rationing CR access for non-essential staff. He knows that this isn't a popular choice, as it leads to long wait times, so he tells them to please let him know if they or their families need care so they can work around the lines. We're given another care log, this time of a 26-year-old man named Hamden Tuck, a member of MTF Omicron 112. Tuck presents with spontaneous lower leg pain after a routine patrol in Perth, and he has not experienced similar pain in his recollection. The pain is worse when standing, but not when walking, and worse in the right leg than the left. Other members of his patrol all report similar pain with identical time of onset, and the symptoms are similar to those of other known sufferers of acute attacks of so-called Perth's knockers, after anomalous influence of an uncontained SCP instance in the area. Maslov enters the room, talking on the phone, as her tech trails behind. She tells whoever she's talking to not remove their bandages just because it is sparkling underneath, asking if they forgot who they work for. After hanging up, she apologizes to Tuck, explaining that they now have them working telephones in addition to halls, as less cleric healing means more for them to do, and there were already too few of them on this floor. Tuck understands, and the two shake hands, but Tuck asks if she needs a second, as he doesn't want to be rude, but she's sweating. Maslov scoffs at the nerve of these young people, but says that she is working hard but is perfectly well. She consults his chart and says that she was a field medic for many years, so she's seen plenty like this. Knockers just need Ziansin medications and rest, and even without cleric, he'll be well soon. Tuck replies that that's a relief, and says that he knew she was the one to see. She asks if he requested her, and he says he more just got lucky, as he's been on a list for weeks. It would have been months, but he was allowed to jump up because he knew the commander. Maslov says that that's the way it goes these days. The only way to get timely care is to know somebody. Tuck says that he was happy to see that she was a former MTF, and thanks her for her service. Maslov also thanks him for his, and asks where he's based. After replying that he's based out of Site 189, the two laugh about the plumbing issues there, and Tuck asks if she's been seeing more MTF agents lately. Maslov says yes, the entire hall is full of them, and asks if Command is doing some large operation. Tuck says if anything, it's been quiet, but he hesitates before saying more, looking towards Maslov's tech. Maslov nods to her and says that this young man wants to rat out a $1 trillion shadow organization, so give them a moment. The tech promptly leaves, and Maslov tells Tuck not to worry, as she's used to it. Tuck is still hesitant, and Maslov says she should have known better than to joke with Operation Security. Tuck concedes and says that Command isn't really adjusting. He thinks that they're used to having 8002 on hand to stitch them up and toss them back into the field. He asks how many MTFs have had a trained medic along, and Maslov acknowledges that few of them had. Tuck continues, saying that even now that cleric's on ration, they're still just throwing them in wherever they want. On their last trip, they got to the drop point and pretty much immediately, Delta went down. The two share a knowing look, and both state that it's always Delta. They radioed Command, who tells them to move him outside and leave him and Beta out there, as they'll send a pickup. Delta's their comms guy, so someone grabs the kit and they keep going forward. They get a few hours in, and another 2 more guys go down from some nasty memetic stuff. They have to get them out right then, so they pull back. It's 3 hours to the entrance, plus another 90 minutes because they're carrying these guys who can't really use their appendages. By the time they get out, it's been maybe 8 or 9 hours since they saw Delta and Beta, but they were still there. The pickup never showed, and they found out later Command radioed 8002 dispatch rather than the closer site they were supposed to. Dispatch is so overloaded that they deferred it and it got lost in the network, nearly costing Delta his leg. Maslov spits, then hastily wipes it up, cursing, and Tuck agrees that that's how they all felt. They approved CR and it covered their ass, but he wonders if that's all 8002 has been doing all this time. There's no medics at other sites, no training increase, and they're still cutting budgets. Now, without Cleric, he doesn't think they know what to do for them. Maslov's tech knocks on the door, letting her know she has 2 minutes left, as she still has 4 more patients to see in the next half hour. Tuck asks her if she thinks that they'll fix Cleric, and if they know how. Maslov considers him for a while before saying that she believes they will, but that's no excuse for this, throwing them away. Forever, they are tainted by this, but she believes they will fix it, and they can depend on help from them. She then corrects herself, saying to not think of it like depending on them. The Foundation is one of the places to look, and it's not a bad place to look, but ultimately they are caring for themselves, finding the resources which they can. By accepting help, they care for themselves. Tuck says that he'll keep that in mind. As cleric function has continued to deteriorate, staff care wait times have exceeded 1 full year, so in order to reduce waits, Aeonian Health has extended its night and weekend hours for non-cleric care. Additionally, they have required providers to attend to more patients per floor, leading to environments in which multiple anomalous hazards may be mixed without full staff attention. Of course, this led to an incident on July 10th, 2023, when outpatient clinics in a memetics wing were filled nearly to capacity, and a hitherto unrecognized interaction occurred between 2 different info hazards in adjacent rooms, spreading a hostile memetic and physiological effect throughout the floor. This effect partially degloved victims' hands and feet, causing distress and leading to a crush for the exits before command ordered the floor sealed and protective anti-memes fired. These anti-memes erased the memories of everyone on the floor, roughly 3,600 people, for the past 3 weeks. This likely contained the anomaly, but per protocol, the floor will remain sealed until Cleric can be fully restored. Restoration of Cleric is now an alpha priority across the Foundation, with MTF resources and firefighters being recruited from other sites, alongside ballistics engineers currently awaiting clearance upgrades so they may begin work in the chambers beneath 8002. Director Torres sends out another note to site administrators, commenting on the repeated requests from care staff to recruit and train more medics, while the cleric problems continue. These requests are denied, and while he understands their concern, their estimates suggest that they may revive cleric fully within the next few months. He also urges them to not reduce their activity for fear of injury to personnel, but, as always, to keep financial outcomes in mind in this uncertain period. To ensure that cleric hours are available to priority administrators and MTF, care staff have been asked to select 16 weeks in the next calendar year for additional overtime hours. In another care log, Maslov treats Elizabeth Lamb, a 57-year-old woman in long-term care for anomalous pain managed with multiple medications. She presents with newly intensified issues following CR rationing for non-essential personnel, and due to communication problems resulting from her condition, her wife Vivian accompanies her to her appointments. Maslov is sitting alone in a room, bathing in cleric radiation, her side smoldering. There are loud voices and footsteps outside in the hall as the entire floor is packed with patients, and a nurse pokes her head through the door. She gasps as Maslov leaps up and covers her burning wound before switching off the CR. She asks if the nurse hasn't heard of knocking, as this is a hospital, so who knows what goes on here. The nurse tells her that she has an emergency call from a Mrs. Lamb, but since it's her break, they were going to send her to another doctor. Maslov says that she will see her, so Elizabeth and Vivian are sent in. Maslov greets the two and says that she has to take her own recordings right now, as her tech is away. Apparently, her father was one of the people trapped on the sealed-off floor, a decision that she comments as being highly questionable. Elizabeth interrupts her and says that she wants cleric, but Vivian tells her that there isn't much available, so they have to stop it for now. Elizabeth replies that she needs it to live, and although Vivian says that they'll find another way, Maslov remarks that they prescribe it very carefully and in small doses, so it's safe. Vivian asks to speak with Maslov aside, where she asks if cleric radiation is addictive. Her wife hasn't been herself in months, ever since her higher dose treatments began, and she always wants to be back here for the next submersion. She has shaking and sweats, and her communication is getting even worse. She never stops asking to come back for more, and this morning she wouldn't even look at her or their daughter until she told her that she'd take her back here and ask. She looked into it in the 8002 records, but it just describes the impacts of increased immersion, with no public information on any risks or testing or anything else she'd expect to see in a Foundation file. Maslov finally speaks, and says that it's assumed to be anomalous medicine, and typical tests are often not performed. The Foundation has been relying upon it for years, and it heals many people, but to be honest, she's not sure if it's addictive or not. Vivian replies that if she doesn't know whether this treatment is harmful, or even how it works, how can she keep prescribing it in such high doses to her wife? Maslov counters that her prescriptions are quite moderate, and she follows the guidelines for dose reduction. She would not prescribe it if she believed it would do harm. After a pause, Vivian says that Maslov knows what it's doing to her, and she keeps giving it anyways. She thought that when they switched to a female provider it would finally be different, as it took 2 years before Dr. Sams even acknowledged that Elizabeth was sick at all. Now she's prescribing something that she knows is poisoning her. Maslov shouts for her to stop, as she would never do that. She would never conspire to give something that knowingly does harm. And while the Foundation is not perfect, Cleric is a miracle. She rubs her side briefly, and says that she is not prescribing a high dose today, and she will monitor her carefully. She promises Vivian that she is on her side, but for now, she must get her wife out of pain. Vivian says that she understands. She's just scared of what this might do to her. She finishes by remarking that they need Maslov to do better, along with all of the staff here. 6 months later, and the Foundation has been unsuccessful in restoring Cleric's functionality. With the CR immersion at near zero, an SCP broke containment and made its way to a populated city in New York, with initial casualties at 13,409. Exposed individuals fanned out to the surrounding countryside and created additional instances, with full casualties to date being unknown, and the anomaly remains uncontained. Cleric exposure is the only known treatment for victims of this anomaly, and until Cleric is restored, site personnel in the US East region have been placed on lockdown to await further instructions. The Overseer Council has authorized 8002 site staff to use any means available to reinvigorate the Cleric engine. Maslov is treating another individual, a 47-year-old male named Oscar Richards, with mundane lower back pain. Per the request of the site director, he is being considered for immediate CR immersion and has been admitted to the Floor 8 clinic. Maslov is visibly exhausted and shaking as she enters the room, and there is shouting outside in the hall. Maslov initially forgets his name, and then says that she has ordered a prescription for a medication, but Richards interrupts her and says that that's not his. She then apologizes and asks him to explain his condition to her once more, despite her seeing him half an hour ago before leaving. Maslov swipes through her forms, with there being 40 of them in this hallway alone, before finding his. Another doctor leans into the room and asks Maslov how long it takes her to bring a script, as they need her out there. Richards tells her that he's just trying to get a cleric authorization. Maslov says that there's a crisis going on and they have almost none left. Richards replies that he doesn't know anything about that, but he's in pain and it's time to reauthorize him. He asks if she can handle signing on the line before sliding over a cleric authorization form with the clear gold stamp of the Site Director's Council on it. Maslov signs the form as Richards smirks, before the door to the room opens and 2 men in medical scrubs enter, Sams and Torres, flanked by several more men in neat gray suits. Torres addresses Dr. Maslov, who seems to recognize him and scowls at him. Torres then notices Richards, tightening his lips upon seeing him, and tells Maslov that, on the Overseer's orders, she needs to come with them. We haven't really gotten to the meat of the article yet, but we can certainly see several themes popping up, including arrogance of bureaucracy and the misuse of authority. Of course, there's more going on with Cleric and the healing treatments than we're aware of at this point, and Maslov definitely has a large part to play yet. It is good to see the Foundation actually using some of their anomalous capabilities to help out the general public, but every rose has a thorn, so we'll have to keep going in part 2 to see where exactly things are going wrong.
SCP-8002 Maslov's Fire Part 2. The SCP Foundation is nothing if not sensible and pragmatic. Emotions have very little to do with how they operate, and they are often forced into situations where they have to make hard decisions in order to save lives and maintain normalcy. Of course, this is a double-edged sword, and plenty of articles showcase how pragmatism can easily blend into callousness. SCP-8002 so far has been about the Foundation's primary medical center, where tens of thousands of personnel and civilians affected by anomalies can be treated using a miraculous system known as Cleric. Of course, there's something sinister lurking on the periphery of Cleric, and things seem centered around one specific woman, Andrea Maslov, a doctor of the highest degree. Let's continue. We pick up where we left things off, as Maslov is being directed on Overseer's orders to go with Sams and Torres, who she doesn't seem to care for. Before we find out exactly where she's being taken, however, we're given access to an addendum about Cleric, requiring level 4 clearance. It's revealed that Cleric does not exist, and in fact, the healing energy perfusing SCP-8002 is not generated by any Foundation-made device, but rather a gargantuan biological entity, superficially similar to a flaming bird. For at least 3,000 years, this creature has lain inert, buried beneath the earth, and SCP-8002 was constructed around it. Researchers believe, however, that this entity is regenerating itself after suffering a critical injury at an unknown point in the past. As it regenerates, it radiates tremendous energy from its body, healing any life near it in addition to itself. Obviously, this effect has been very beneficial to the Foundation, although estimates suggest that repeated exposure to the energy forms a dependence. Given the massive financial and logistical benefits of relying upon it, though, the Foundation has chosen to accept this risk. There's also a line redacted here. As of January 19, 2023, however, the entity is estimated to be nearing the end of its regeneration process, now releasing measurably less energy each day, greatly interfering with Foundation medical efforts. Estimates suggest that it may fully regenerate as early as February 12, 2024, ceasing its CR emissions entirely and emerging as a fully formed, deific threat beneath the organization's largest hospital. There is currently no known way to force the creature to produce additional radiation, or reproduce it independently. The Foundation has attempted a number of methods, including producing energy at the specific wavelength and EV of the CR emissions, producing the energy within the same room as the creature, producing the energy using a generator implanted within the creature, and re-injuring the creature to prolong the regeneration period. These all failed, however, as either their equipment just gets incinerated if it's near the creature, or the creature rapidly heals any damage the Foundation can manage to do. Whether a mechanism exists to injure it, or if this method would even result in renewed energy production, is not known. One final strategy has been devised by Dr. Sams and Director Torres, involving the recruitment of a key member of SCP-8002's medical staff. When asked, however, Maslov immediately says no, telling them to not hurt things without reason or sense, as nothing comes from this. When you hurt, you do not know how much hurt you will do or when to stop, and once you begin hurting, it is never ending. She is a doctor, so she does not hurt, she repairs. After a brief pause, Torres remarks that she lost that power, but Maslov replies that what she lost is nothing compared to the training she still has. Sams argues that she's seen for herself what that bird can do, so if she wants to help, this is the best way to do it. Maslov hesitates, but says she doesn't think so. Nothing good will come of this, and it could be worse. She was hurt badly and lost it all. Sams says that they have to try, as they have nothing else to lose, but Maslov disagrees. There's a pause as Sams and Torres look at one another before they say that they know that she relies upon the energy herself. They've seen the cameras, so they know she's used it to treat herself more than she should, as well as sneaking a script to a few people here and there. They assure her that they are not her enemies, but they know she sees the power that the bird has, and she wants it back. Maslov doesn't say anything, and Sams urges her to consider it, but Torres shakes his head, and they tell her that they won't coerce her, but they are in a crisis, and they need an answer within 12 hours. The two leave, as Maslov sits there, staring at her hands. Later, back in the hospital hallway, Maslov continues to stare at her hands as her tech approaches to ask if she'll see her 3 o'clock appointment, Henry Peck. She enters the room, finding Peck pacing inside, looking utterly disheveled. Peck had previously turned down cleric radiation for his condition, which she remarks upon. Peck, sweating and erratic, says that he tried other meds, and he slept on it, and he'd like to give it a try after all. He'd like to try it now. Maslov pauses and says that it's almost gone now, as cleric is nearing full shutdown. Peck says that yes, he heard about that on his way over here. Maslov, however, counters that he knew about that long before he came today, as she has seen his charts. He went to Dr. Sams for a cleric prescription months ago and has been on treatment since last March. Peck slumps and says he was too embarrassed to come back to her, and Maslov understands. You should never see a doctor for any reason if you don't want to. She remarks that Sams cut him off, and Peck says that he gave priority to another guy at his office, someone named Richards, but he never understood why. After that, he couldn't get any more treatment, as it's being tightly rationed. So instead, he went back on the medication she prescribed, but he started feeling terrible. He repeats the word terrible several times, before suddenly leaping up, stating that he's desperate. The pain came right back once he was off cleric, and he doesn't have much money or connections. He thought that she was so good to him before, and asks her to help him. He hasn't thought straight in weeks. He can't sleep. He can't even wash. Maslov replies that she cannot prescribe it, and it's not a matter of not wanting to, she is just literally unable. Peck begins panicking and yelling, clawing at his hair, before noticing the orange cleric switch in the corner. He leaps towards it, and although Maslov tries to say something, he curses at her and presses the switch. The cleric shields retract, but no light fills the room, and his jaw and Maslov's side do not catch fire. Maslov tells him that there's almost none left now, and they have to go far deeper underground to get it. Peck shakes his head slowly and continues pressing the switch repeatedly. He turns on Maslov and yells at her to make it work, before breaking down in sobs. He apologizes multiple times and says that he needs it so much. He asks her what he should do, and Maslov approaches him, crouching down with him. She touches his shoulder and tells him that he will live and fight as best as he can for now, and meanwhile, she will get him out of pain. Next, we're informed about Project 8002 Marrow, a last-ditch effort
to injure the deific avian entity in order to spur its continued generation of life-saving medical radiation. The core of the project is Dr. Maslov, whose injury left her unable to utilize her healing abilities. Researchers believe afflicting a similar injury onto the creature will prevent its natural healing factor from trivializing the wound, forcing it to continue emitting cleric radiation in a longer-term attempt to recover. Maslov's tissue will need to be sampled and fashioned into a weapon for the attack to succeed. Maslov was initially resistant to this proposal, but has since agreed to participate. On February 12, 2024, at 10:17 p.m., SCP-8002 was evacuated except for essential staff, security, and patients who cannot be moved. Life support and anomalous stabilization is prepared for patients should cleric radiation production be altered by the project. Radiation detectors across the facility show that CR generation has fallen to a trickle, and the facility is dark on all floors above the core. At 10:31 p.m., 6 MTFs position themselves around the anomaly and building, supported by on-site staff. The payload is a 14-meter tungsten cylinder, and it hangs near the top of the creature's chamber, suspended from a shielded, jet-black mechanism. It will be dropped, not fired, as it cannot be adequately propelled due to its semi-reality, and at least one other indescribably intrinsic quality drawn from the anomaly reproduced from Maslov's blood. In the observation room nearby, Drs. Sams, Torres, and Maslov sit and watch behind successive layers of reinforced glass, with Maslov in a wheelchair. At 10:39, the MTFs are advised that the creature's regeneration is imminent, and all hands stand by for emergency action. A minute later, the seismographic and Hume sensors fire simultaneously as the chamber is bathed in a burst of white-hot flames. The glass in the room warps and the metal bends, but the payload and supporting device hold steady as the creature moves for the first time in nearly 3,200 years. Slowly, it stands, being over 30 feet tall at the shoulder, with a peering, mobile neck. It examines its surroundings, its head moving like a marionette's, not unlike that of a large hen. Its wings are folded at its sides, with huge red and gold folds awash in liquid fire. It is otherworldly, bright and curious, raising its neck to peck at the roof of the tungsten dome before swinging down to peer inside the observation room. It lets off a squawk, louder than a jet engine, sounding somewhere between a goose and a car horn, causing Sams and Torres to jump. MTF Command gives the order to drop the payload, causing the antimatter strings to retract. The bird pauses, and as the payload begins to drop, it suddenly looks more closely into the observation chamber. It peers, clearly and intently, at Maslov, cocking its titanic head to one side. Its eyes flicker in the twilight. For a fraction of a second, sensors in the observation chamber detect a burst of cleric radiation, with the dosage exceeding the normal dose for 8002 critical care areas by 1,000 times, enough to sustain the entire facility for weeks. Maslov gasps and chokes, and her entire body is momentarily aflame in white-hot cinders. The payload falls, contacting the creature on its left shoulder. There is a single, blinding flash as the bird's flames go out, and the room plunges into pitch darkness. The bird emits a piercing, resonating cry and falls to the ground. Around it, the payload delivers its next attack, as swirling black poison pours over it, submerging it. This poison is acroamatic sludge, the random junk left over from other anomalous processes, intended to worsen whatever damage the initial payload was able to cause. The bird rises, jerkily, to its feet, and then collapses again, before rising again. It jolts to the right, then to the left, trying to shake off the substance which drips thickly from its body. It cries out again, writhing and contorting its head and neck, pecking savagely at the wound on its shoulder. It staggers, slamming into the reinforced tungsten dome, shaking the observation room. Then it raises its wings, beating them against the rounded edge, trying to find a way out, or at least a higher place to perch. It continues to struggle for 10 minutes, calling intermittently and tearing at its wound before falling weakly back onto its side. The creature then lies there, breathing heavily, giving hollow calls into the darkness. Its flames do not reignite, and radiation detectors show that its CR generation has abruptly ceased. Well, that sure was pretty awful, but it seems like they might have gone a little overboard in trying to injure it. Torres puts out another note to site administrators the following day, telling them that a spontaneous error occurred within the cleric system, causing it to cease function entirely. Right now, they don't have any way of getting it back online, and he wishes he had better news for them. They're working hard to come up with an alternative, but for now, it might be wise to hold back their MTFs from the field. He also remarks that the crisis on the East Coast, after an SCP got loose, is only getting worse. Their inpatient care facilities here are nearing max capacity, with 107,000 beds filled, but they don't know how to treat these cases without cleric. Thankfully, there's been a small miracle with Dr. Andrea Maslov. Many of them might know Maslov as the legendary Red's Red for her time as a field medic with MTF Alpha 1. She's a powerful healing reality bender who lost her abilities for many years, but yesterday something happened. They don't know why, but she woke up this morning with all of her healing power returned. The O5s have put her in charge of 8002's floor operations, while they try and dig out of the cleric hole. He finishes by welcoming Maslov back, and stating that they need her now more than ever. Maslov is walking briskly between rooms with a team of nurses, dispatching them around the floor, as she's approached by Sams and Torres. She and her team continue walking without stopping, as Sams tells her that they need to speak with her about the cleric system. Maslov continues walking as they converse, and Sams says that, as she knows, there has been an error with the system which demands immediate attention. As a powerful healer herself, they believe she may be able to help with this. Sams leans in close, saying that they think there's a patient who needs her attention. Maslov replies, asking if he knew that they were addicting their own staff. Torres tells her to be careful of what she says in the presence of her nurses, as they cannot vouch for their safety. Maslov replies that perhaps they can't, but she can. The two of them are here to ask for her help, so they need to answer her question. The two men look at each other before Torres says that she's read the file, so they considered that there might have been a moderate risk. In other words, they knew, and Maslov asks if they exploited it. One of Maslov's techs hands her a photocopied copy of the Birds documentation, and she points to a highlighted passage, the redacted part from before. Sams is shocked that she gave a copy of this to her staff, but Maslov insists that they explain themselves now. The Foundation doesn't simply redact secrets. It redacts secrets which are bad for the Foundation. How many the Foundation has killed, how it hurts people, what goes on at the worst of its black sites. This is also a secret which is bad for the Foundation. She has seen maybe 2,000 classified files in 18 years in the red right hand, so she's correct about this. So, how might the Foundation think of widespread addiction in a positive way when they have so many employees that now want it badly and cannot find it elsewhere? Torres warns her that if she continues, but she cuts him off by stopping the group and turning on him. Everyone is silent as she raises a finger to his face, glowing white with pale heat. She tells him that he cannot threaten her anymore,
and asks if they exploited this addiction. Sams admits that they knew perhaps since the radiation was harmless and even beneficial, it might be an effective incentive on rare occasions. Maslov asks if they evaluated MTF risk differently because of the radiation, because they could take greater risks and just be healed up. She saw that when she was in the field, how they were given worse dangers because they assumed she could just fix them up. But that's how 4 of her team died, and she lost her healing for 3 years. Torres admits that, yes, of course, when they have a resource, they employ it to its greatest capabilities. Maslov cuts him off, asking her tech if she got that, who pulls out a digital recorder from her coat pocket. Torres tries to argue, but Maslov cuts him off again, stating that she is now responsible for floor operations and saving hundreds of lives a day, and to be blunt, she doesn't trust them for shit. Neither, she should think, do the O5 Council. She has heard what they wish of her, and she will consider it, but for the time being, she tells them to kindly not waste her time. Maslov walks off, her entourage trailing after her, leaving Sams and Torres standing in the hallway. Later, Maslov is writing furiously in her office when her tech enters. Maslov interrupts her, saying that they have a busy day ahead as usual, and although she only got a few hours sleep, she says that it's under control. She tells her that they need to triage patients on sublevel 2, as the outbreak is worsening and critical victims are transported there from outlying areas. She will go there in a moment, along with any staff they have. The tech interrupts her, saying that she could use some help, showing her her bleeding right arm. Maslov leaps up and examines the wound, finding it to be green and jagged. The tech explains that she was passing an unattended hot room, and the door was cracked open. She didn't notice, and something reached out. Maslov tells her that she should know better, as they're in the depths of 8002, and she should remember the procedures. She stops herself, looking at the tech, who has begun to cry. The tech tells her that she feels sick, and Maslov agrees that she looks it, touching her forehead. She says that she's hot, then cold, and the fluctuations are too rapid. She has an anomalous rhythm, as something is trying to take her over. Maslov slams the door to the office, pulling a bar across it, and removes her gloves and coat. The tech asks if she is going to die, but Maslov tells her that she would never let that happen, and pulls her close. Maslov closes her eyes, as the room fills with a searing burst of multicolored light. The light is brief, but dazzling, and stains the papers on the desk. When it clears, Maslov collapses into a chair, and the tech's wound has vanished. She tells her that it's gone now, and she cleaned out the rest of her while she was at it, so anything wrong in there for the next decade has been fixed up now. The tech thanks her profusely, to which Maslov says that after how many times she has helped her find her glasses over the years, she can consider them even. Maslov is panting, and says that she burnt herself out now though, and she can't go up to the ward for a bit. She tells the tech to sit with her for a bit, and the two sit together as the building around them fills with screams. The tech hesitatingly asks her how she got her powers back. Maslov pauses and says that she was healed by something much bigger and stronger and better than her. She's not sure why or how, as perhaps it felt benevolent or just curious, but it thought of her for a small moment. She hates to think, though, what she gave back to it in kind. Later, Elizabeth, the woman from before that was addicted to cleric treatments, and her wife Vivian are in the hallway at 8002. Elizabeth is crying, the wing is in disarray, and the floor is shaking. Maslov sees them and gasps, asking what they're doing here. The three embrace, and Vivian explains that with this crisis, they've been displaced. Elizabeth needs anomalous care,
so they bounced them between 4 different sites, but nobody could handle them, so they sent them here. Maslov doesn't understand, as 8002 is for MTFs and civilians now, but she's glad she found them. She turns to Elizabeth, who is still crying and holding her leg. Maslov admits to Vivian that she was right, and cleric radiation is no good, but Vivian now disagrees. They tried the other prescriptions, all of them, but none of them did anything. The radiation was the only thing that worked, and they need it back. Maslov insists, however, that they must not use it, and besides, they'll never repair it, as the damage is too great. There's plenty that they can do themselves, however, and she brushes her hands over Elizabeth's legs. She pauses her crying and smiles. Maslov says that for many years she believed that the Foundation was working for them, but they are not. They must learn to be strong themselves. She stands and removes her hands, but as soon as she does, Elizabeth begins crying again. She crouches and touches her again, but as soon as she releases her hands, Elizabeth cries again. Maslov is confused, as this should heal her, not just help with the pain. There's some shouting down the hallway, and Maslov's tech tells her that they should go. Elizabeth and Vivian both beg her not to go, and Maslov looks to her tech, telling her that she just needs a few more minutes. But the tech shakes her head, saying that there is no time. Outside, in a massive makeshift tent, are the entirety of MTF Omicron 112, consisting of 218 individuals. Nurses are moving about, and many of the soldiers are convulsing rhythmically. Maslov moves from bed to bed, healing them, and those she touches cry out before falling back asleep. She's about halfway through when she comments on how she forgot how draining this can be. A man calls out to her, Lieutenant Tuck, whom she treated before, and she sees that he's burnt from his chin down to his waist, with the wound simmering. Tuck explains that some kind of tendril got him pretty good, but that's how it goes. His voice is weak, and he's having trouble breathing. Maslov touches him, and her hands glow white as she tells him that they're not done with him yet. Tuck gasps and says that he can see why she was a medic. She sits down heavily on his bed and says that yes, she is very good, the best there is, but even still she is only just keeping up. It was just like he said, that they don't know what to do without the radiation. They need more help with this crisis, as there are too many affected. Tuck tells her that he knows she'll handle it, and she says that she'll have to, as she'll never be trusting them again. Tuck then gasps again, to which Maslov says that she fixed him just moments ago. She touches him again, and he gasps and calms down. She tells him to hold it together, as she has many yet to go. Tuck tells her that when he came in before, she said something that really comforted him. She told him that it was okay to trust them if you do it for you, that sometimes that's how you help yourself. Maybe she can use that too. Maslov begins to argue, but Tuck gasps again and begins choking. She lays her hands on him, causing him to glow, but he doesn't stop choking. She calls for a code blue and compression, but nobody is listening as the clamor around her is too loud and her tech is attending to another patient on the other side of the room. Tuck collapses onto his bunk, his body falling still. Maslov swears in anger and begins pacing the floor as soldiers nearby watch her anxiously. She yells that she got it back, but continues pacing before stopping and staring up at the moon. She finally says, fine. The Foundation knows that it addicts, and they use it to exploit them, overwork them, and trap them. Well done to her for figuring it all out. But she saw what the bird itself will do if allowed. She walks over to the field telephone and dials up Torres,
telling him that she's willing to do it now, but she has conditions. Inside of the bird's chamber, the phoenix lies motionless, pressing itself back against a wall. It breathes heavily, and without its flames, it's revealed as multicolored, with a golden head and neck over red and green wings. Its eyes are electric, the color of molten metal, and its legs, now strewn out beside it, are the same color, an intense, brazen orange. On its left shoulder is a dark, oozing injury the size of a vehicle. At the far end of the room, a door opens, and Maslov enters. A team of researchers, including her floor staff and Sams and Torres, watch from the observation room. Maslov turns to the Phoenix and says that it's time they get to know each other. The Phoenix's breathing has increased in volume to sound like wind, and as Maslov approaches, it jerks away, clawing at the wall. She stops and raises her hands in the air, telling her that she is a beauty and she must come near to help. The bird eyes her as she takes one hesitant step, then another, pausing each time to wait for the creature's breathing to slow. Gradually, it calms, moving its massive neck out from the edge of the room to look more carefully at her. Maslov takes a faster step, but the bird hisses and darts away, causing Maslov to yell to let her help it, calling it stupid. The bird peers at her with its molten eyes, and she says that she will show it something that she does not show many. She lifts her scrubs and undershirt, exposing her left side. Where her wound used to be, there is now a snake-shaped scar winding along her torso. In the Phoenix's presence, it seems ethereally pale, and the bird uncurls very slightly while peering at it. She tells it to look if it likes, as they are the same, she thinks, what this was and what its is. Some kind of terrible magic. The Phoenix moves closer, extending its neck out to peer carefully at her side. Maslov says that she is a healer, like it is, but even she could not heal this, despite trying for years. It took away most of her power just to keep her alive, and she's much weaker from it, even now, she thinks. She's also afraid that they got their wounds the same way, from evil idiots attacking them in ways they knew not. The Phoenix moves its beak close to Maslov, who tenses but doesn't back away, and it lets out its enormous red tongue, gently licking Maslov's side. She tells it that it is gross, as it emits a loud squeak. She says that it's so noisy as well, but now it needs to let her near. She steps towards the Phoenix's shoulder, and it doesn't back away. Maslov examines the colossal wound, eventually picking a spot. She tells it that she doesn't guarantee that this does much, as they both have lost something of what they could do from before, but she will at least try. She has other things in mind as well. The Phoenix looks at her, blinking slowly, and she asks herself why she bothers talking, as it's like talking to a giant chicken. She turns back and touches the bird, pressing both of her hands against its wing at the edge of the shoulder, and moving her hands slowly together to form a triangle with her fingers at the very edge of the wound. She closes her eyes as the Phoenix relaxes, laying its neck out on the ground. She tells it that now she will get it out of pain. Her hands begin to flicker and blur, followed by her arms, her torso, and her whole body. Then the Phoenix itself begins to blur, starting from the point of contact and spreading outward to surround and encompass the whole injury. The bird's eyes, watching her work, are alive with internal light. The wound and Maslov dance like a mirage has fallen over them. They are distorted and strange, half-transparent in the dim security lights. She yells that she will not succumb as she braces herself, leaning her whole weight into the Phoenix, and screams. Her body is a single, vibrating point of distortion.
The Phoenix then calls, suddenly and loudly, as a host of radiation alarms around the room go off altogether. At the very tip of the bird's tail, a tiny blue flame bursts suddenly to life. Maslov collapses, and guards rush in to surround her, but the Phoenix screeches and whips its neck around to push them back. It wraps around Maslov, enveloping her tightly in its feathers, hiding her from sight as a muffled groan is heard. We're then given a new file for SCP-8002, still with the Thaumiel object class, but now with Andrea Maslov as its director and research head. It also notes that this document describes a core infrastructural element of the SCP Foundation, and no part of it ever is to be classified for any reason. SCP-8002 is a 503-acre subterranean megastructure operated by the Foundation, which was previously taken up by the organization's main hospital and medical center. As of February 19, 2024, it also serves an additional purpose of regeneration and medical support for 8002-1, a deific entity superficially similar to an enormous golden pheasant. This entity was the source of the radiation which once permeated the facility, and its current injuries, inflicted by the Foundation in an effort to force higher radiation output, prevent it from emitting more than a trace amount. 8002 remains the Foundation's primary hospital, but without the benefit of cleric radiation, much of the institution's previous operations are critically compromised. This situation has been further complicated by strikes and coordinated organizing by hospital care staff, largely supported by newly appointed site director Andrea Maslov. Due to a pre-existing agreement between the O5 Council and Maslov, made as a condition for the director's care of the Phoenix, the following measures have been approved for staff. Hiring budget has been increased by 600%. Training budget has been increased by 800%. Overtime pay and sick pay for all staff has been increased. New measures have been introduced to reduce unnecessary deployment of MTF, and facilities and infrastructure have been updated to support operations less dependent on CR. Through increased staffing and careful rationing of CR access, Director Maslov succeeded in resolving an ongoing care crisis at the facility and across the US East Coast. Her paradigms have since been implemented to begin more sustainable care for anomalously afflicted patients. At present, the facility is operating sustainably at approximately 26% of its previous capacity, without relying on more than a passing amount of the bird's healing radiation. When its abilities are used in care, rigorous protocol is in place to ensure limited and transparent employment of its effects. Dependence is monitored, and staff are training in appropriate prescription. Most importantly, patients are informed of the risk associated with long-term exposure. The lower third of the 8002 complex has been redesigned as a containment and rejuvenation facility for the Phoenix, in hopes that the creature may be restored to its previous capabilities. However, regardless of its ultimate contributions, the Foundation is dedicated to sustaining and supporting the creature for the remainder of its natural life. In creating care for such a complex entity, the Foundation invested heavily in a wide variety of state-of-the-art support for anomalous beings. It's been suggested that these systems may be used for care of other injured anomalies, incorporating care for such entities as part of the organization's hospital system. This proposal has been approved, designated as Project 8002-Soul. 36 anomalous entities are now cared for on-site, with more scheduled for admittance in the near future. The Phoenix remains in good condition, and has begun to emit an increasing quantity of cleric radiation, growing at a very small rate per day. The entity is alert, calm, and, according to Maslov's reports, warm to the touch. I imagine more than some of you thought that Maslov might sacrifice herself to save the Phoenix, or that the Phoenix would end up dead, or some other grim ending. Instead, not only are both the Phoenix and Maslov alive and well, but Maslov was able to institute real change into how the Foundation handles the treatment and care of both their own personnel, but also civilians and even anomalies. It's not hard to see how the Foundation ended up in the position they were in, though. Much like how SCP-2000 is often discussed as a general get-out-of-jail-free card for disasters, the Foundation here had a miraculous healthcare system that could patch up practically any wound. What's the harm, then, in sending your soldiers into dangerous situations, comforted in knowing that they'll be just fine afterwards, and if they happen to become addicted to that healing, that's certainly not going to stop anything. And while they're usually not in the business of purposefully harming innocent anomalies, the Phoenix was their golden ticket, so some hard decisions had to be made. Of course, as it turned out, Maslov was able to show how not only were they all idiots, but they were also callous and cruel. I think, like many other articles, this one could have gone in a number of different directions, and we certainly got pretty much the happiest one. With Maslov having so much pull now as far as the Foundation's medical systems go, it's likely that they'll be able to use the Phoenix's powers eventually to do a lot more good in the world than before. The article was about rebirth in more ways than one, as well as the benefits of treating people decently.